Hi, everybody who's just joining us. Thank you so much for coming along today. As you'll be used to by now, we just need to do a few minutes of letting people in. Please do, if you're interested, if you'd like to, while you're waiting, introduce yourself in the chat, say who you are and why you've come along. Really appreciate you being here with us this lunchtime, or lunchtime in the UK at least. Um, and yeah, really excited to talk you through our new report. I'm here in Leeds, and actually the sun is trying to come out. So yeah, please do say hello in the chat. I'll just give it a couple of minutes, and then we'll get started. Yeah, really nice to see you all. Thanks for coming along. Please do say hello if you'd like to. Hi, Anna. Oh, I wish I was in Lisbon right now. Brill. Hi, Michael. Nice to see you. Hi, Cheng. Hi, Claire. Hi, Gajenda. Thanks so much for coming along. I always love to see where people have come from because it reminds me that even though I'm sitting in my house, this work is really global. Um, Brilliant. Yeah, I'll just maybe give it one or two more meetings. Hi, David. Hi, Rosalind. Nice to see you. Hi, Ray. Hi, Joseph. Thanks for coming along. Um, yeah, we've just got a 1 hour session today. Really excited to talk you through some of our findings and our recommendations from the report. Um, And yeah, we're pretty strict at my society, so we won't be going over an hour, and there should be time for questions at the end. Um, so yeah, okay, I think we might as well get started. I know that people are still arriving, but I will say a big hello and welcome again to the launch of our latest research, which is supporting participation, building an effective European civic tech hub. My name's Julia Cushion. I'm the policy and advocacy manager here at my society, and yeah, have been really lucky to be working with my lovely colleagues Alex and Gemma and brilliant Kirsty from Sitra on this project. So. This is our agenda for the day. Sorry, I'll just move my bits around. And this is what we have planned for the next hour or so. And these are obviously UK times. And so, yeah, that's what we're working with. But we've got the next hour together. Firstly, I'm going to do a quick overview of who we are at My Society and our interest in this project and how we came to work on it. Then I'll pass over to Kirsty, who will give us an introduction to Citra and explain why the research was commissioned by them and some important background information to kind of set the scene. And then we'll get to the meat of it. We'll go to our brilliant Alex and Gemma from my society who are going to share our key findings and recommendations from the research. And then there'll be some time for questions and answers at the end, talking about what's next. And yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts and where you're thinking with all of these exciting things. So, please do, yeah, use the chat throughout. I'll do a bit of housekeeping. We are recording today's event and it will be published on the My Society YouTube channel and the TikTok Knowledge Hub so that other people who can't join us today can watch back afterwards. But yeah, do be aware of that if you ask questions. And yeah, have your camera on. You may be in the recording. Please use the chat to contribute your thoughts as we go along and to post any questions for our speakers. We won't answer questions until we get to the end, but it's nice to sort of see them coming through. And through the chat function, you can, emoji react on to people's questions and things that you want to ask. So yes, we'll come to the questions at the end. And there is a live transcript available, so you just need to click the transcript button if you would like that. Brilliant. So, if you don't know my society, it's my job to give you a little bit of an introduction. Why do we care about civic tech adoption and the development of the EU Civic Tech Hub? Well, we are a charity that was formed in 2003, 23 years ago now. And this is a little video. There's a page on our website about our history, and it's just a quick scroll. Don't expect you to be able to read it so quickly, but just to show all of the things that we've been up to over the years. We've been creating, running, researching, and sharing civic tech tools to help people engage and participate in democracy. All sorts of things in there. And yeah, our biggest civic tech services are UK based, which is where Alex, Gemma, and I are. But yeah, you can see some of them there from all sorts of areas of civic tech. So what do they know is access to information. They work for you as parliamentary monitoring. But we don't just work in the UK. Our code bases are all open source and have been reused by organisations all around the world. We think around 44 countries worldwide, helping to make democracy more accessible. And yeah, nice, really, really nice to see people from all over the world on this call today. Um, and yes, another little video here just of our research site. So yeah, if you're interested in the other research we've done over the years, that's research.mysociety.org. And our new paper that we're launching today is up there now as well. So yes, research is a really key part of what we do, and it's been such a nice project to work on. This one to add to that kind of collection. And that also, this research project in particular sits in our TICTeC stream. So I'm sure, and I can see some names here of people who've come to TICTeC, both in person and when we've done it online. And TICTeC, the Impacts of Civic Technology, is a series of conferences, convenings, research, and grant projects that actively bring together people interested in civic and pro-democracy technology from all around the world. So yeah, we're trying to prove and improve the impact and effectiveness of civic tech. And so I think this research project sits really, really nicely within that broader scheme of work. And yeah, we're all united here today, trying to bring citizens together to kind of help everybody engage more effectively in democracies around the world. And yeah, nice to see some of those pictures of in-person things. Although I do, a webinar works really well too. It's nice to get to see people over lunchtime. And yes, the research we present today is the latest TIC initiative to help increase the impacts of civic tech around the world. And we're just really grateful for you to giving up a little bit of your time to spend it with us today while we talk through this research. I'm now going to pass on to Kirsty from Sitra, who's going to give us a bit of an overview of their work and how they came to commission this research. So I will stop my share and hand over to Kirsty.
Thank you. Just a second. I will try my best to get the slides going. Are you now seeing the slides in the presenter mode?
No, actually, we're not. Sorry, we've still got the border around it, which happened once in our practice and once
Okay.
So if it's better, I could maybe share them, Kirsty. Up to you.
That's fine. We can do that.
Brill. Okay.
My organization belongs to the Teams tribe, so I'm a bit clumsy when it comes to using any other service.
No,
But we
not
can.
at all. How does that look to you?
This looks fine.
Great.
So now let's get started. So welcome all on my behalf as well. My name is Kirsi Hantula, and I come from the Finnish Innovation Fund called Sitra. We can go to the next slide. So I was first asked to tell just a little bit about Sitra. I won't bore you with a lot of details, but I believe that many of you probably have not heard of Sitra before. So instead, if you have heard of the UK-based Nesta, you can think of us being something similar to them, with two important exceptions though. So Sitra is actually supervised by our national parliament, and also we mostly finance our activities with the dividends of our investments. So that gives us a little bit of sort of financial leeway to the Finnish parliament as well. Personally, I work in a program called Democracy Innovations. In this program, we've been working for a few years now, mostly piloting a couple of citizen participation methods. And these methods being deliberative citizen panels and some digital participation tools. My own expertise lies in the side of digital participation. Until recently, I was leading this team that was tasked to scale the use of a particular digital participation platform called Voxit. Outside of Voxit, this platform is most often known as Polis, which I think a lot of you probably are familiar with. So next slide, please. In this program, recently we've often been looking at this particular picture. And the reason being that while we've been working with scaling these particular citizen participation methods, we've noticed that there seem to be these recurring common barriers that currently exist and make it harder for these methods to really be integrated within decision-making processes in public administrations, for instance. And due to this, you can click again, Julia, and again. Due to this, we've decided that our current focus goes more and more into projects that we think will help to sort of bridge this gap between the early adopters who already believe that these types of methods are valuable and do have a benefit, and between the rest of the people who still are not on the same page with people like us in this call. Yes, and I think there are also simultaneously we see that there are also these sort of stronger winds that are also blowing in the European level. It seems like there's a bigger pull for digital participation as well, because there are all these European level initiatives that have to do with strengthening the democratic resilience, or maybe improving our technical sovereignty. And one of these initiatives is the EU Commission's Democracy Shield, which was announced this past October. And as part of this initiative, the European Commission has already announced that it will set up a civic tech hub, and this hub will be supporting the providers of citizen participation platforms, as well as other civic tech platforms, and also trying to engage with public administrations, trying to make sure that the demand for these types of tools is increasing. So based on all this, in Sitra, we think that within the coming months or so, the European Commission, along with the other actors that are active in the field of civic tech, will probably jointly have to decide what are the biggest service needs that currently exist within the ecosystem. And while they do this, they also need to think about how the Civic Tech Hub ought to be placed within these larger European narratives that have to do with digital sovereignty or democratic resilience. Because of this, Sitra decided to commission this study from My Society. We thought that it would be very valuable to truly dive into the landscape of the current European civic tech ecosystem and truly hear their points of views. And while My Society has been doing this, we have actually also been doing interviews on our own, and we have been conducting interviews with people who represent public administrations or organizations that closely collaborate with public administrations within the field of digital participation. So I'll be really interested in hearing what Alex and Gemma have to say, because I think that we will certainly find out that there are a lot of things that have come up in both of these interview streams. So now I think it'll be time to give the floor to Alex and Gemma. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kirsty. I will share my slides. Hang on a second. There you go. Can you see that, everybody? Can you hear me okay? Yeah, you can
Yeah,
hear that.
perfect.
Great. Oh, well, hello, everybody. So nice to see you all and see so many familiar faces from TikToks over the years and people that we interviewed for this research. So thanks a lot for coming along. So yeah, I'm delighted to give you an overview today of the research we've been doing and talk through our recommendations. So as Kirsty says, one of the main goals of the EU Civic Tech Hub and of the EU Democracy Shield is to increase European democratic resilience by creating infrastructure and methods of participation that enrich democracy. So our research focuses on the use of tech for increased civic participation in decision making and how it can be adopted and used more. So our core question for this research was, what is needed from an EU Civic Tech Hub to increase the use of participation tech across Europe? And you'll notice that we're using participation tech rather than civic tech more broadly, as we sort of the scope of the EU Civic Tech Hub is primarily focused at participation, so helping people to participate in democratic decision making. And as Kirsty said, we've been tasked with doing the engagement and the research with the civic tech and democratic innovation practitioner side, and Sitra have conducted research with civil servant government side. So over the last couple of months, we've interviewed 19 people from 12 countries, and they've been a mix of open source, commercial and non-profit participation tech providers and democratic innovators. And the results, we've got 14 recommendations for EU Civic Tech Hub activities, separated into short and long-term ambitions. So next slide. So the findings from our research show that to achieve increased use of participation tech across Europe requires 3 mutually reinforcing shifts. So we need increased demand of participation tech. So at the moment, not that many public authorities really demand use of these tools. We need more public authorities to believe that participation processes actually do lead to better outcomes. We also need strengthened supply of participation tech. So we need a range of tools that can effectively support participation processes being available to officials who are actually able to procure and use them. And we need optimized implementation. So we need these tools to really be impactful and be the best they can be. And that involves things like closing the feedback loop and making sure we know the impacts of these. So there's more confidence, more political confidence that participation can be an excellent governance tool and used to solve problems. So we structured our 14 recommendations around these 3 shifts and separate them into short and long-term activities and ambitions as per this slide. So yeah, we will talk through each of these recommendations and each of these mutually reinforcing shifts. So firstly, in order to sort of increase demand of participation tech, we think the EU Civic Tech Hub should develop a lightweight front door to signpost to existing networks and resources. As a lot of us know on this call, there's already amazing resources out there. Places like the People Powered does amazing guides, Civic Tech Field Guide. There's loads of interesting networks already doing amazing stuff. So the EU Civic Tech Hub should simply, signpost to those and become an official, visible source to help authorities interested in learning more about participation tech and be that connective infrastructure to strengthen the existing ecosystem. Next slide. We also think the EU Civic Tech Hub could provide more authority-focused case studies demonstrating impact, and not only demonstrating impact, but showing really, what are the conditions, the decisions, the mechanisms that make, participation processes using technology really successful, sustainable, adopted. So not just, saying these are the tools that you can use, but really delving into the depth of, how did they actually get procured? What decisions had to be made in order for these processes to work well. Over to Alex.
No. So one of the reasons we've split this over into short-term and long-term ones is because in all our interviews we kept running into problems that were really important but also really big. And so what we sort of felt was important was to sort of take the hub on a path from doing useful things immediately, but making it able to like tap towards those long-term goals. So one of them was this sort of sense that a lot of the obstacles people described were in part a feature of the market not yet being fully mature, so that there's not enough demand to properly support all the existing actors or indeed the new ones there. And some of the scaling and financial issues are effectively all part of this problem. So, as terms of a long-term goal and ambition, the hub should aim towards trying to build demand for participation as a broader goal, sort of grow that sustainable market. At the same time as for the moment, sort of getting those short-term activities like these case studies, like these stuff to support that goal without fully moving away from technology aspect of it. So that's about sharing success stories. That's about trying to sort of integrate the idea of participation tech into networks of civil servants, politicians. So basically, should try to be a bridge between participation tech and those wider networks. Yes, Jim, next slide, please.
That's the next slide.
Cool. Thank you. So this section is about strengthening supply. It's about the how do we improve make more sustainable the services and providers that exist and can exist in the future. So helping new entrants and to meet different needs at different places. So again, we're splitting this into short-term and long-term perspectives. We'll talk about this a bit more later, but procurement difficulties were a consistent problem across our interviewees. Both from those who do it a lot and have frustrations, but also actually those who don't do it at all because it's so difficult because of all those obstacles. So here we found providers who may or may not intend to work with governments later on, but right now are aimed at alternate markets in the community or educational sectors. And we think this is really interesting in terms of helping new entrants talk to customers or users sooner, in terms of helping sort of make the product fit work better. And so we think a useful short-term thing the hub can do is help provide more information about these alternate outlets for participation software to help people sort of build their products, build their markets without it being such a big barrier to go from I've got an idea and also I need to figure out the procurement system. So to be a clearer avenue to those first customers or tenures. Next slide, please, Gemma. So there's a pause there, so I'm just waiting around, but it's all good. So the next few recommendations sort of relate to the open and source closed debate, and we've got similarly short and long-term views on this. So in this debate, there's a lot of interesting overlapping arguments perspective, and our recommendations aim to untangle a few different parts of that. From the democracy for shield perspective, the goal is democratic sovereignty and resilience. But for some practitioners, open source is also just more of an expression of the same philosophy that led to an interest in participation software in the first place. Whereas for others, participation can be facilitated without a strong requirement for open source. And we'll come back to this a bit later in terms of thinking about wider democratic innovation, is this idea on what different groups sometimes disagree on which ideas have to go together at the same time. And part of what Hub needs to do is sort of navigate those different arguments. The first recommendation here is what we should consider low-hanging fruit in terms of understanding of open source technology from both sides of the problem. So this is difficulty for new entrants, people who are interested in participation, but maybe haven't done a lot of software development before, in understanding what open source does and doesn't mean, to people who are like aspirationally open source, I think we should describe it in the report, who want to do it at some point but don't do it at the start. And why? What are the obstacles to that, and how can resources help them understand more about, not necessarily making that as the only choice, but make an informed choice sooner. And similarly, from the other side, in terms of understanding from government to civil servants about what open source means, confusion about whether that it just means software should be completely free, and when that is given a poor understanding of what the software can do and how it's useful. So similarly, education aimed in that direction about how open source achieves those wider goals at the same time as what it does and doesn't mean. So there's not misunderstandings from that point of view. Next slide, please, Gemma. The next part of this is sort of thinking about business model diversity. So in the long run, the hub has interest in both promoting participation tech and promoting open source. But our view is it doesn't have to do both at the same time initially. It should take a broad view on business model diversity to better actually existing participation groups, while trying to unravel some of those obstacles to open source adoption. So on the one side of things is helping people sort of share those case studies, working out those obstacles to participation in general, but also the sort of things we're hearing from you is about difficulty with open source in terms of a disconnect between that big strategic picture about how open source helps strategic independence at the same time as how that isn't reflected in local procurement policy. And one of our sort of intermediate bridges there is thinking about, sorry, next slide, please, Gemma. Practical interoperability. So where, as a sort of bridge between these different perspectives, where process might help better interrelation both between participation tech and more foundational digital public infrastructure, but also interoperability between different providers, where that can help different products work as a suite for different kinds of solutions. And we think this might be especially useful in terms of like feeding back to that case for having big impact in terms of making it easier for data to flow both ways, to be able to pass back to your participants. Here is what we did in the end with this is a useful way of sort of thinking about how these processes can work together. And I think I hand back to Gemma at this point for the next section.
Thanks. So yeah, I'll move on to the next sort of shift needed. So we need optimized implementation of participation tech, basically participation tech that works really well and has the most impact possible. So how can the EU Civic Tech Hub help with that? So our first recommendation is supporting pilots in what we're calling participation thin areas. So we've read that one of the hub's goals will be to support pilot projects, and our recommendation would be to do these in what we're saying in participation thin areas. So where democratic culture, digital access and local tech options are weaker, as therefore these sort of projects represent the highest learning opportunity and fills an equity gap that the hub should sort of actively try and fill and actively close. So that's our first recommendation in this shift. Otherwise, as highlighted in the research and at previous TIC-Techs, there currently can be quite a divide between sort of more general democracy and participation networks, where some can even be quite pessimistic about the use of tech. So a divide between sort of those types of organizations, networks, and civic tech providers. We recommend the hub sort of tries to bridge this gap, which we try to do a bit at TIC-Techs in the past, and there's some really good initiatives outside of TIC-Tech trying to do this at the moment. But we think this is really important because participation technology will be more effective when it is closely connected to democratic innovation practitioners, to researchers, to sort of local participation networks. In terms of a lot of democratic innovations talking about deliberation, so smaller groups of people participating in processes. How can tech help with that? It'd be good to sort of connect all of these groups with universities, so the impact of these tools can actually be more systemically sort of proven, worked on, shown, so therefore the technology gets better and more people invest in it and start using it more and believe in it. So I think I've talked through that one. And then otherwise, we recommend the hub sort of providing some risk mitigation guidance. So as Alex touched upon, throughout the interviews, we heard how difficult and complex procurement and compliance processes can be for civic tech providers, because these are often shaped by public authorities concerns around security, accessibility, data protection. So they make the processes really quite hard to engage with if you're not a huge, big organization. So we thought the hub could provide, bring together practical guidance, case studies, standards to help authorities manage these risks proportionately in their procurement processes, so it, doesn't exclude smaller organizations. So we think that would help. And over to Alex, I think.
So on our long-term approaches for this area, one of the areas I think is worth exploring is sort of sandbox approaches, which is basically trying to think about this as structures to make it easier for people on both sides who fundamentally are interested and want to explore and connect to do so more effectively. From the government and civil service side, it can be hard to understand in practice what a platform looks like. We're going through a sales process, but this can make it difficult for the lightly interested person to dig further. So we think there's real merit in opening this up a bit, in having a process for fake data can be made more available on a centralized platform to help people really explore and play around with software to understand, like, oh, I understand how this applies to my problem. From the other side of things, there are new entrants who would benefit a lot from content potential users earlier, and especially sort of build on the idea of hackathons, where like building panels of interested civil servants and politicians who are fundamentally, have been convinced already about participation and want better tools for it, could be useful in helping provide earlier feedback about how these things will align in the long run. So just basically try to help encourage software that better meets everyone's needs and that builds these better connections across the software. And the final one, which is tucked down here at the bottom, is regulation procurement reform, is a very big one. So this is a very hard, but potentially very rewarding problem in the long run. So this came up so much in some of our interviews. One of those things about, so we just say you stop doing everything else and do procurement reforms. No, you should do the short-term things first. But this is one of those sort of very big problems that's really worth engaging with in the long run. That basically the hub should try to adopt an approach that aligns these high-level strategic goals that we want. We think democracy will be better with more participation. That needs engagement in how that is provided. It can be provided at scale. And those strategic goals about stronger democracy and about independence in tech, with the reality on the ground about how the market currently works, about difficulties in local procurement, as General was talking about risk mitigation that makes it hard for some people to compete. So just trying to like have an eye on in both directions, both in helping shift local approaches, but also on how new approaches at the EU level affect and relate to this sort of idea of civic participation tech. So that is a very big problem, but it's one that's really worth engaging with that have a big impact over the long run. And our last set of steps are cross-cutting themes across these three areas. You should always have a list of three, and then you should have a cross-cutting one to cheat and have a fourth. So here are the two important areas where the importance of building political, not just administrative buy-in. So like one of the sort of key concerns about this is the theory of how this is going to work is that there are people are in a stronger democracy because they can see the impacts on how things are happening and changing their lives. But for that to happen, things have to really have an impact. And so that requires understanding, like, well, why, when we have participation exercise, do they not always make a difference? And trying to understand more about this idea of political buy-in to how to make sure these things go forward and have a result. So this is both so those case studies we were talking about way back at the start in terms of like how has participation tech helped solve problems that politicians have, and how does that scale to similar problems other people have? We did some research a few years ago looking at local councils in the UK, and there's really interesting sense that there were certain political situations where there were roadblocks or where there were specific reasons why progress couldn't be made, where participation really helped unblock obstacles and to understand like participation is a solution to problems people currently have. And similarly, we found that attitudes to participation just got a lot more friendly the first time someone tried it. So having that sense, like what is the first step to take people along that road, and then how can you grow from there, would really sort of help across all these areas, grow that market, get solutions that better fit those first problems, and move on from there. The second part of this is the impact of AI. I had a lot of chat from AI about from different perspectives. Our view is this didn't need a specific function, but was one in which it spread nicely across these different areas. So sort of three different things that came out of this that AI potentially changing what civic tech is in terms of changing how things are coded and developed. More mass availability of AI creates new problems for public participation platforms in terms of authenticity of users, but also participation tech that is itself strongly interwoven with AI in terms of using LLMs to code responses or to create synthesis positions. So basically, it's less that this has a specific AI function, but more how you can the companies to understand how these AI issues relate to other foundational streams of work. So, for instance, that role around participation tech that uses AI itself is both around regulation, compliance to the AI Act, and tech sovereignty. So how the difficulties in deploying AI in the European cloud, that effectively at the moment, a lot of tokens are effectively subsidized by big American providers. What does that look like in the long run? And similarly, some of the issues around authenticity and public participation, that relates to issues around digital public infrastructure, validation of users. These are not fundamentally different kinds of problems, but they are both intensified and new areas created by the existence of AI. So it's just something that throughout this, it needs to be sort of addressed through those different themes. And I think that is the end of my stuff.
Brill, thank you so much. Oh, I just need to turn my camera back on. Thank you so much, Alex and Gemma, and for the questions that are already coming through in the chat. Yeah, it's been such an interesting research project, and as you can see, we thought a bit about how to try and like map it all out and give it a format, and so hopefully that has been useful. Please do put any more questions in the chat, and thank you to everyone who already has. We can go through those. Before we do that, Kirsty, I wondered about passing back to you if you had any reflections on this research, if it was what you were expected, or yeah, any key themes that emerged for you and any connections with the research that you at Sitra have been doing.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. And I applaud the wonderful work you did. I think it's really, really good. And I love the fact that it has such a wealth of practical ideas that could and should be done to lower some of these barriers that currently exist. Having done all of the interviews that we did by Sitra during this project, so I feel like I have a pretty good sort of chance to reflect on some of the findings that I did while conducting these interviews with public officials. So one of the sort of key findings that I have is the fact that the main obstacles that you've listed are largely the same. So they are equally painful on both sides. Having said that, I do think that there are some sort of minor differences that have to do with the perspectives of each party. So I think in my interviews, I think the absolute key barrier that nearly everybody talked about was the lack of leadership support, leadership gap. And this was not only the lack of sort of political buy-in, but also the lack of leadership amongst top civil servants. And quite a lot of people pointed out that it seems that there's still a mismatch between these sort of more personal incentives of political and political leaders and also top civil servants and digital participation and also that they felt that maybe the impact of these platforms could be bigger if these platforms could be integrated better in decision-making processes. So I think there's still something to be done in that area. Another thing that strongly resonates with my findings is all these procurement-related challenges. And I actually personally found it a bit surprising that it came across so strongly also in my interviews. Now, keep in mind that the people that I interviewed were people who were mostly citizen participation experts within the public administration or worked in such organizations that work in the area of digital participation. So they felt equally that procuring citizen participation platforms is currently very difficult, and oftentimes they felt that within public administrations there isn't enough capacity or expertise to make these procurements to go more smoothly. So oftentimes the burden of trying to get the procurement process finalized is placed on the shoulders of these participation experts who also lack the expertise of doing these type of things. Yeah, maybe one more thing I want to point out is when you mentioned about the particular problems of that also that open source platforms are also facing. So interestingly, these questions seldomly came up in my interviews. So I think this also maybe underlines your point in the sense that I do think that there still is not very much expertise within public administration when it has to do with open source platforms and their sort of the special questions that have to do with procuring these types of platforms and special questions that have to do with how to maintain these platforms, for instance, or how to develop them technically. So all of these questions, I think there isn't really enough understanding within public administrations at large. But yeah, these are some of my sort of top level observations. But thank you. It's been really nice to work with you and also hearing these final insights.
Oh, thank you. And it's been such a joy to work with you. And I do think that this dual sort of aspect that we're having, both looking from the civic tech side and from within authority side, is giving us a really rich picture. Before we go to questions, and thank you so much, everyone, putting really great questions in the chat. Across our panel, I guess it's worth saying, what do we want to happen next, or what will happen next with this research? Where is it being taken? Yeah, Alex, did you want to speak to that about the next steps for it?
I think this is just something that so it's interesting. It's been a great opportunity to like talk to lots of people working in participation tech. So obviously this feeds into Citra's work and future advocacy on things. Also, we're sort of thinking in terms of our future tech program, how can we best do some of these joining up aspects of it that are a good idea regardless. And how can we better sort of play a constructive role with whatever emerges next in terms of trying to build some of these things, but also where some of these lessons scale beyond participation tech to wider civic tech, where these wider obstacles. Participation tech is quite interesting in it. It's an unusual sort of civic tech in having a sort of commercial market in the sense that there is, in principle, a wide potential source of incomes for it. So some of it doesn't scale cleanly, but lots of the stuff in terms of this being able to lightly bridge different communities, I think is deeply important in terms of helping people understand, get over that sort of initial like, well, what does this how do we talk to people who are interested in participation who don't know about tech and vice versa? And simply how do we talk to people in government who are not coming from the civic side? So I think that there's a set of lessons here that we try to like work into our future tech work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so true. A big theme was this like marrying the participation or the civic side and the tech side, and helping people, whichever role they play within the kind of relationships at the heart of this here, to feel more confident, I think. Brilliant. So thank you everybody for all of your questions. We've got loads and we've got plenty of time to answer them, which is lovely. Oh, sorry. Um, just to start us off, to what extent was usability and accessibility in terms of user research and design addressed across open source civic tech? I think maybe that's about in our interviews and in the report. It's a hugely underfunded and undersupported focus in open source and is really critical for the adoption for regular non-open source confident folks. Alex, did you want to have a go at that one? Just about
Yeah, sure. So
accessibility.
I think this is it's something that will be very so. We didn't cover it in a lot of ground, except in sort of discussing, especially the localization aspect of civic tech in terms of how that can present. Why, to an extent, it was interesting to explore if smaller solutions work in different places to sort of, especially in the sort of terms of that participation fin framing. When is it best to have one big solution that can be customized lots of different things versus when different areas need different things? And that can sort of go both ways in terms of being very catered to a specific thing, but also as things get larger and are better supported by more clients, it's much easier to go like, well, let's get the accessibility right. Let's get this right because this affects absolutely everyone across all our many clients. So I think it's deeply important part of civic tech. Basically, I agree with the critique in the question that yes, it's hugely underfunded, but it's also hugely rewarding in terms of making things actually accessible and usable to people, especially given obviously a critique in general of technology-based participation is the accessibility of it. So anything that be used to sort of mitigate that in terms of making sure that it's not artificially creating obstacles that can't be fixed is deeply important.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you so much. And then this next question is about maintenance burden. Since creating open source software, civic tech is an effort, and constantly maintaining that open source is critical, that just can't be foisted onto local government offices or foundations. And so this idea of the maintenance burden, it is something that came up a lot in our interviews. And, as open source organization ourselves, we know that, especially on the funding side, it can be hard to get funding to maintain code for a long time. And so, yeah, I would say that that was a theme. We didn't go into loads of detail in the report, partly because we didn't want the report to be a million miles long. But when we talk about this idea within strengthening the supply of a longer term activity of developing open source kind of educational resources and open source resources, I think that that is a key part of that. And like helping organizations to navigate that need there, that there is an ongoing maintenance. Alex, did you want to come in on that and on the idea of maintenance burden?
No, just as especially, I think it's something that a hub can especially do is connect what's obviously deeply to one of us working in open source. Like we can say open source is important because it supports everything else. But if you're interested in the outcomes of it, a hub that can sort of clearly trace, like, well, we're trying to do these high level outcomes, but it depends on all this work back here, which is poorly funded, being able to have organizations that can sort of make that connection between here are the impacts of open source eventually, and here is the requirements of it, and here is why it's such a great deal. That is a sort of a useful thing a hub can do is sort of connect that sort of the principled case with the practical problem.
Brill, yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And then, yeah, there was a comment from Margot in the chat about interoperability, and there's the opportunities for using tools for ideation and then separate ones for discussion and voting. And I think that got support in the chat. And so I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, anybody. But yeah, I think a great point. Michael was asking, how do we submit projects for support? I wish that we were the EU Civic Tech Hub, but we are not. And somebody mentioned the Civic Tech Field Guide in the chat, but I wanted maybe we should say something about like where the Civic Tech Hub is going, and that there is this a higher level meeting happening next week, and what we think that the next kind of steps of the development of the hub itself are going to be. Yeah, Kirsty.
Yeah, of course, really none of us knows where the Civic Tech Hub will be going at the moment. But part of the reason why we commissioned this study and also have done some work on our own is to hopefully help to build a thorough understanding and a shared understanding of the kinds of needs that the Civic Tech Hub ought to serve. What we know at this point is that the Commission has said that it will set up the Civic Tech Hub. How big the scope of the hub will be, I think, is still a bit of an open question. But it seems quite clear that the hub is meant to collaborate with the actors that already exist within the field in Europe. So I don't think the meaning is that it will start doing things that already work well. So I think there are a lot of established actors already in Europe and elsewhere that are doing a marvelous job. So I think it's the hub's role should be to rather amplify their work one way or another, while also sort of focusing its own resources in some of the more critical gaps that currently exist. I can say that next week in Brussels, we will organize a closed, it's going to be like a closed discussion, roundtable discussion with around 30 participants, some of them coming also from the Commission. And the idea that is that we will present these findings as well as our own and there will be a thorough discussion, and then hopefully we can over there as well make sure that these needs that currently exist are understood broadly, not only in these within the civic tech communities, but also outside of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And it is really nice, as well as being joined by all of our lovely friends on the call today, to know that this is going in a direction and hopefully getting into the hands of people with some authority on this. And yeah, just been so great to work with you on it, Kirsty. So yeah, brilliant questions, and please do keep them coming in. Oh, thank you so much, Anna. So there was one here about connecting pilot tech projects with participation activities targeted at developing the most deprived and alienated communities. Yeah, I really like this point, David, and I think that's something that we're trying to get at in this idea of participation thin areas. Alex, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, just especially where that aligns with either a national or European level existing programs, because I sort of sense of this is unlike to have a lot of money to like commission pilots at the, maybe that's a nice long-term goal, but like the thing to be doing is to look for approaches that already exist, that are already supported by some fund or another, to understand like how can we learn things from this fund that already exists? How can we understand how participation relates to this? How can we try and learn and integrate with this? So I feel especially just trying to be aligned with whatever the local funding is or the local exploration, and just being like, well, we're the Civic Hub, we're able to like learn from this and support it and sort of work well with others, feels like again a nice bridge between those sort of existing funds and programs and the participation tech world.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Great. And then our next question is politicians, like everybody else, are worried by uncertainty. Is there a thought how participation, while its outcomes are uncertain, can reduce uncertainty where it matters more in the environment, in elections, these sorts of things? I think that's a really nice point. And although there is obviously levels of uncertainty in participation, I think something that we try and put across in the report is we talk about authority-focused case studies. So really trying to encourage people from authorities to have access to materials that show what their role could be or how it has worked in the past and what the outcomes have been, especially and even when those outcomes weren't maybe the expected ones or even the desired ones, but that they have gone on to have positive outcomes for citizens. So yes, and I think that might connect to, we can get to it later, but there is a later question about research, and I think research and really good, well-researched, well-written case studies can be really part of the picture here in increasing that confidence. But yeah, did Alex, Gemma, Kirsty want to come in at all on that idea of managing uncertainty and maybe even reducing it?
Yes, that it relates to some questions further on about like why there isn't that sort of support for it at the moment. I think that really varies by experience. Like I think there is, it's absolutely yes, participation is a tool that helps you. You start off with uncertainty. By the end of the process, you've learned more, and that's it's the process is only uncertain, but when people have a lack of experience with it compared to other ways of resolving decisions. And I think it's one of those things by supporting supporting lessons, supporting sharing of case studies between places, supporting understanding like how this does that process of like, I'm unsure about what to do next. How can I go on that journey to understanding what I should do next? And how is this a tool that helps me do that? That really helps. That sort of shift it from being, you want me to do a new unfamiliar thing. Why? It's like for this reason, because it reduces your uncertainty about what to happen next in a way that helps everyone out.
Yeah, absolutely.
I could add to at one point, I think I personally found it really interesting when I was listening to my respondents that a lot of them pointed out that especially political leaders seem to find digital participation more risky compared to other forms of citizen participation. And maybe because they are often associated with social media or something, or like the images or ideas of what it is to engage with people come from social media. So they feel that it's like uncontrollable and maybe there's trolling and unpleasant things and you cannot really, as a politician or as a leader, you cannot control it. So I think there's also an element of trying to educate
Mm.
people about what digital participation truly is or
That's
can
a
be.
great point. Yeah, and absolutely. And for those of us who are immersed in digital day to day, we might not remember that that is a like a mindset and approach for people from within public authorities. And so, yeah, so helpful to see it from both sides. Um, Yeah, nice point from Agenda here about the nature of power here. It's a power problem. People in power don't want power to be decentralized, and the movement has to be bottom up, bottom up. I do think, yeah, obviously power is an important role here, and I think, something that Matt Stempeck told us as part of the research was about, the combination where civic tech has been really impactful has been in combination with more people-led movements in and outside of the digital space, and so I think that's a nice point. Um, and yeah, the next question about this idea of political buy-in, which was one of the key themes of ours and was one of the cross-cutting themes. Why isn't there political buy-in? Do they not know what's possible to achieve? Do they associate it with transparency and run away with it, run away from it? Are they against the idea of having citizens participate more? I think we've touched on this, but it does feel like maybe people think that a lot of risk comes with participation and participation tech. Did anyone want to add any more to that?
Notice that was the question I was sort of piggybacking on earlier, that it's about that sort of like making things less risky is sometimes about adapting the technology to solve people's problems, but sometimes it is just about getting over that initial stage where like we people don't understand it, and that lack of understanding is the uncertainty and the risk. And so I think there's real potential for I think there's real potential for low-hanging fruits to make a big difference in terms of people understand like how are problems I have solved in new ways, and how are those new ways available and scalable. And I think that sort of process will gradually unlock a lot of interesting things in this area.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in a way, there's a case to be made for the like first order good of participation, but there's a maybe more accessible second order case where like it will deliver good results and we can show you that it has kind of thing. Um, Brilliant. Okay, I know we're running out of time, but we've got so many Brill questions. I think there's a nice one here. Initially, platforms were built by and for hackers. They could move and create there freely and equally. Platforms for non-expert users have to compromise on this idea of freedom and creativity and rail in what users can do. So platforms always seem to be guiding and nudging to engage in a certain way, but that, might lead to excluding others. How can this be addressed? And it's an interesting problem and question for civic tech and that balance of maybe when they're designing with public authorities, how much freedom and democratic space do we want to give a potential user? Uh, did we have any thoughts on that? I'm not sure it didn't particularly come up in the
Yeah.
interviews, but I like the challenge.
I think it's interesting in the sense that I think this is why it's good to have a big market that export lots of different kinds of things. Because I think there are definitely some things, but there's a real thing for like, let's have a proper think through this process. But also there are some, things like, yes, we want a mostly structured process that goes through things, and it depends on the size of participants and stuff. So I think there is a real sort of sense like it's good to have both, and it's good to have a market where people understand the options for both. That sometimes you might be just like, we're very early stage at this. We just want a really creative exercise where we understand the next stages versus like we want to engage a lot of people and we need a way that can sort of work that through constructively. And I think this sort of goes back to that sort of point about interoperability, where it's like, the technology can do so many different things that it's in a way it's good if all the platforms are not clones of each other, where they are going like, here is how we think about participation in this way. And I think it's interesting to sort of when you have practitioners who are coming up with slightly different ideas about what democracy is trying to achieve. And I think that is a useful diversity to have in the market. So yes, it's a tension that cannot go away because it's sort of like creativity itself. So that's good to go.
I like that. And yeah, one more thought I thought of while you were speaking, Alex, there was that another thing that we mentioned in the report is this idea that public authorities are not the only market here that we're talking about. And obviously they are a very big one, but especially for new and emerging or like companies and organizations that some of the people that we talked to, their clients weren't just public authorities, they were education organizations, NGOs, other people like that who may want different levels of creativity and and space and freedom and that sort of thing. And so some interesting stuff happening across this quite varied market. Okay, brilliant. I think we actually only have 1 minute left. And so if you'll forgive me, I won't take another question and instead we'll just use the time to say thank you so much everybody for coming. We will be emailing both the slides, the report and the recording of this around to people and posting it on our website and social media and everything. Really appreciate your time and coming along. And yeah, just really nice to be in this room and sharing this report. And really nice to know that it is going somewhere next week at this high level meeting. And brilliant questions, brilliant speakers. Thank you so much. And hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and a lovely weekend. Thank you. Thank you.